Hi everyone, welcome to this very adaptable and agile webinar where we're just going to go with the flow of the day. We've got an amazing video, but we actually have everyone here on screen that you can see, which is all you need today. And if we can get the video up and running, we'll play it at the very end. So welcome on board. We've got an amazing pool of speakers, which is what you've all joined us for. We also have way more than 80 people who have registered for today's webinar, who are all gradually coming on board now. And so we're really looking forward to having a fabulous conversation with you all.
Hi everybody, my name's Dr. Nat Galea. I am the co-founder along with Kat Takra of Cultivate Sponsorship. And today I'd just like to begin by doing an acknowledgement to country. Cultivate is housed on the Cammeraygal land, and we welcome everybody to this call who are joining us from all the different lands around this country in Australia. And we pay our respects to the First Nations elders past, present and emerging. And I would also like to say as well that we stand with the Uluru Statement from the Heart and recognise that it is a tremendous gift to this nation, as this land was never ceded. As Kat said, today I'm going to give you a brief overview on Cultivate and introduce other members of our team, and then I'm going to pass over to Kat and we'll do a interesting and fabulous panel discussion around a point that's particularly sticky within different sectors, but today we're going to focus on the legal sector and professional services. It's a shame that we couldn't get the video started, but we will try again towards the end of the session, so stick around. Kat and I are the co-founders of Cultivate Sponsorship, and we also have on the call Simone Gigg, who's our Client Solutions Manager. Cultivate Sponsorship was built by us. Its specific aim is really to build awareness and ownership amongst leaders of gender equality and sponsorship and how they sponsor those people within their organisation. My PhD research found that often male leaders particularly sponsor men and do so sometimes quite without realising it. And what I found was that females within organisations were often overlooked. So Cultivate program actually provides companies with the tools to be able to embed a sponsorship, a culture of sponsorship within their organisation, and really make leaders and their employees aware of the structural and individual barriers to equality within our organisation. As I said today, we have 4 dynamic panellists and experts in their fields joining us, and Kat will introduce them soon. All the participants that are joining us gradually, you're all actually on mute, but we really encourage you to ask questions. There's a Q&A section, and there's also a chat section, and Simone will be moderating those. So please fire away any questions you might have throughout the webinar, and we will engage with any of those points that are risen. The panel panel discussion will run for about 45 minutes, and then we'll leave also time at the end for questions. The event will officially conclude at 3:15, but Kat and I will stay around and answer any questions that you might have until 3:30. We had almost 80 people, just over 80 people registered for this event, so we can see that it's actually a very poignant topic today, and in fact I think it's really hit a nerve in terms of particularly the legal sector, as we've seen some very dramatic and revelations this year within that sector. Anyway, I'm going to hand you over actually to a lawyer to facilitate, because I'm a construction project manager, and so I'm going to hand you over to Kat and she will facilitate the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Nat. Just to make it even easier to see, and some of you are already raring along, which is great. So you'll see that there's a panel. Chat is an open forum, so you can post comments there that everyone can read, so go for it. And then questions actually sends a anonymous or private question to us, and Simone, as Nat pointed out, will be moderating those and posing those to the guest speakers as we go, because we know that many of you are going to have comments, questions, areas that you'd like to deep dive into. Simone may be known to many of you. She's actually spent the last 20 years as a head of HR for many global law firms, including many of the people online. So you're surrounded by a wealth of expertise on this topic. As we've said sort of in the lead up, it's really about exploring what it takes to progress the careers of everyone in law firms and professional services. But all the research shows that there have been variable speeds of progression, and unfortunately that has a gendered and other lens to it. And it's how do we stop that? How do we break that trend that we really want to explore and unpack with everybody here today? As Nat said, I'm a lawyer by background, and it's probably some of those early experiences in my life that have led me to be focused much more on gender equality. One of the very first interviews I went to for a mid-sized law firm in Canberra, the managing partner was interviewing me, and he said, pardon me, some French coming up, but I'm with construction people, so you're used to it. And this man literally looked at me in the eyes, and the first question he said to me was, why the should I hire you? You're going to get knocked up and leave. I kid you not. That was the precise verbatim quotable quote. And I just sat there in my little country road suit as a 20-something-year-old going, what do you do? You clearly get a signal that maybe perhaps you're not welcome in that law firm, and needless to say, they hired a bloke. So things like that, you know, kind of put a few roadblocks in the way. And I'm hoping that over the last few years, perhaps it's been decades, let's not unpack that, things have changed. But I'm not the expert in that, which is why we've got Adam, Troy, Bryony and Georgina joining us. And we're going to have a really open discussion amongst ourselves. We're going to learn a little bit about the career paths people have taken, about the challenges and complications we've all faced. And we're going to unpack what it takes to really stop this once and for all. Clearly, we've had this unexpected curveball called COVID come along our way, and that's changed a lot of behaviours and perhaps some mindsets. So let's hope that that's a step in the right direction. But enough about me, though I will call out that I'm seeing that ISIL there is saying, I'm with you, Katrina, I'm a civil engineer and working construction. Heard it a lot. Well, that's probably the F-bomb, but also some of that language about how you're just not good enough based on your gender. Anyway, you will learn about these people themselves. I'm a big fan of letting people tell their story, but just so you know, we've got online, Adam is the Chief Counsel for ACOM Australia, so coming at us from one of those industries. Bryony, partner at PwC. I'm going in alphabetical order, nothing gendered, nothing special. Georgina Koch is General Counsel at Ampol. And last but never least, Troy Roderick, who is just a D&I extraordinaire, who's well known to many for his research with Sydney Uni and D&I work in his own right. So go for it, guys. This is an unmissable opportunity to ask these people questions and also have a chat. So Georgina, I might kick off with you. And everybody loves hearing how other people did it. And I know we'd love to hear a little bit about your story and how it was that you went from being a junior lawyer somewhere to becoming the general counsel of a major global organisation.
Well, thanks, Kat, and hi, everyone. I'm really happy to be part of this panel today and with these other esteemed colleagues and participating in what's a really important discussion. So thank you for having me, and thanks everyone for tuning in. So a little bit about my background and story. I think, like a lot of bright-eyed and bushy-tailed law students, I did a summer clerkship in my final year of law school, and that was at Clayton Utes, and they then offered me a graduate position as a lawyer, which I took. So stayed at the firm, did my graduate rotations, and ended up settling in the competition team, where I stayed happily for a number of years, and then moved across to the M&A team, which was where I firmly settled and what would go on to become my bread and butter in terms of work. When I was at Clayton Utes, I was given the opportunity to go on secondment to a client, which I took. And that was really my first taste of what being in-house meant. And I really enjoyed the commercial aspect of being an in-house lawyer and being firmly embedded in the business. And so that was a real insight to me into where I thought my career path would take me. So I returned back to Clayton Utes. And once I got to the point where I felt as though I'd had enough training and a really good solid background behind me, I moved in-house and took a role at the Commonwealth Bank, where I then stayed for the next 6 years. So at CBA, I was exposed to some really great work, led some excellent transactions, and worked under some great leaders. And my final role there was as head of their M&A and corporate advisory legal team. I then took an extended career break and I had 3 children, a daughter and twin sons, and I undertook a Masters of Law. So then when I was ready to return to full-time work, I was planning on heading back to the bank, but a former colleague of mine from Clayton Utes actually reached out to me. It was the then General Counsel at Caltex, now known as Ampol, thanks to our rebrand. And she called me up and asked if I'd be interested in joining her. And at the time, I knew nothing about the industry. I'd never heard of the oil code. I had absolutely no idea what it would be like or what I was getting myself into. But I really enjoyed the relationship that I'd had with that senior leader. And while it wasn't a formal sponsorship relationship like the kind, Kat, that you and the team at Cultivate run, it was definitely an informal sponsorship relationship. And because of that relationship, I took the plunge, and instead of heading back to, I guess, the security of financial services, I headed across to Caltex and Ampol, and almost 4 years later, I haven't looked back. So that's really a bit about my background.
Amazing. I mean, I think the question on most people's mind is, how on earth did you do it all with twins and a toddler and changing industries? And I guess you've shared that the impact that the relationship and that person's sponsorship of you had on you. But I mean, what gave you the confidence to make that big leap, I guess? Because changing industries, as you said, can be daunting in and of itself when you're going into new codes and new laws and products.
Yeah, I think that's right, Kat. And to be honest, I also did it at a time in my career where I was probably feeling pretty vulnerable. So returning from extended leave, having had my 3 children and having been out of the workforce for a number of years, it was a big risk. And I think what really gave me the confidence to do it was that relationship with my sort of informal sponsor, if you like. And I knew that I had her, it was a woman, the general counsel at the time, and I knew that I had her support. And I felt confident to take that risk, knowing that she was an excellent leader and that she was supportive of me and my career and my development. And so from a personal perspective, I think that those sponsorship relationships, be they formal or informal, can have a really pivotal impact on someone's career journey.
Mm. And it's an amazing mix, as you mentioned, that having that vulnerability and knowing what it is, but having the confidence in the person that's sort of building the bridge over to another pathway, it can really help you overcome any of those barriers because you know someone's got your back and believes in you.
Yeah.
Bryony, lots of nodding and shaking. I suspect some aspects that you resonate with. I mean, the stats, you know, for the legal industry are pretty telling. More than 50% of senior associates are women. Way more are, you know, graduates. We've known that for almost a decade now, and yet partners are still about 24.5%. But you're a partner, so how did you do it? What's the secret? Everyone on the line is probably going to want to know that.
Well, my story is so much more boring and linear than everybody else on the call. So I started life, my professional life after graduating, kind of like Georgina, started out as a summer clerk at Baker and McKenzie, and then went all the way through, was like stuck in one place. Well, not stuck in one place, I actually had a really good time. But I was at Baker and McKenzie all the way through to partner. And in terms of how did that happen, I think for me, one of the really big differences between Georgina and I is where we ended up after our rotations. So, and I think there's a really big difference in terms of the type of law that you practice in a large professional services firm. So for me, I'm a labour lawyer, and the group that I was in was actually predominantly male partners and senior associates when I started. But notwithstanding, a lot of my clients were female. I actually had some amazing client sponsors who are female, very senior practitioners who are still people that I respect a lot today, and who, you know, had become, being my client as a junior all the way through to being a partner, which is a pretty special thing. So really amazing clients. Also had really amazing sponsors outside of my group. I was very excited to meet Georgina virtually the other day and work out that, like her, I too am a twin mum. I've survived. And so I have an older son and then had twins second time around, and I actually became a partner when I was pregnant with the twins. And I think I shared when we sort of had our little prep call the other day that I was approached to have a conversation about partnership in the year that it happened, when I was about 11 weeks pregnant, and I was tired and terribly unwell and so not up for it. And I had the conversation initially with my own partners, who said, "Yep, fine, don't worry about it this year." But it was a bunch of the female partners who kind of marched off and decided that they weren't having a bar of that and pushed me through. So it's that really strong partnership, sponsorship from female partners, but also male partners. So I think I got lucky in a respect in that I'm a labour lawyer because I love people's stories. You know, most employment lawyers, I know Kat because Kat's an employment lawyer. Most of us are a particular type of, you know, Myers-Briggs, ENFP kind of, you know, story, big personality type people. And so that's where it's, you know, we tend to end up, which is helpful that our clients often are women who are also very conscious of and interested in equality and diversity, which is very different to being in M&A land or litigation land, where the time pressures are very different. And so I do feel as though I've had a bit of luck on my side because of where I have ended up in terms of the type of law that I practice.
I really like that you've introduced this idea too, that a sponsor isn't necessarily one person or an obvious person, but it can be a network of people around you. And that really goes to the heart of what we're talking about, which is those key and critical relationships that usually happen organically or naturally over time, and how incredibly powerful and supportive they can be, both to you and of you, sometimes without you knowing, because they're advocating for you, which really goes to exactly what sponsorship's all about. I mean, that's what Nat's research sort of dived into, and the fact that it does tend to happen, unfortunately, more between people who are similar, which is why we've developed a strategy to overcome that tendency so that it's experienced more broadly. But I love that you can reflect back on your story and identify that you had that strong surrounding sort of supportive network at a time that you probably weren't thinking along those lines yourself, if you're you know,
made a massive difference.
Yeah. I don't know why you said that you've got a boring story. I don't think anyone who's got twins becoming a brand new partner thinks of that as boring. Anyway, that's
I've blocked out a large part of that. Yeah.
Exactly. Adam, just while we're getting to know everybody, you've heard Georgina and Bryony's sort of pathways around legal practice, and obviously you're in the most senior legal role at ACOM. Tell us a little bit about how you got there.
Sure, thanks, Kat, and hi, everyone. My history is quite interesting, I think, because I started in a paralegal firm, small paralegal firm in Sydney as a paralegal, and then I decided at the end of my university that I wanted to try something different, travel a little bit. A few of my friends were going over to the UK, so I thought, why not? I had a British passport, be a wonderful experience, wanted to travel. So I took a graduate position with PwC in London in their business recovery services practice. So worked with clients like Royal Bank of Scotland and BP, undertaking due diligence, some pretty interesting stuff, sort of winding up companies, 100 plus companies that had sitting there dormant for years and years and years. So it was really interesting. Got out to meet clients. Did a lot of travel around Europe. So sort of there for about 4 years. Came back and worked PwC in Sydney for a couple of years in contracting and procurement. And then, like Georgina, I really wanted to do something different. I hadn't worked in the construction industry at all. There was a job at AECOM, engineering construction. I thought it'd be new. I thought it'd be exciting. So that was 11 years ago. Took the job and have been there ever since. Other than one small change about 4 years ago, I left and then was tempted to come back. So for me, it's always been just trying something different. Working with clients, working with internal clients as well, building culture, high performing teams. That's really what I'm interested in. In terms of sponsors, when I look back, I haven't really had a sponsor as such. Like Georgina, sort of that informal sponsorship relationship, more on the mentoring side. So certainly learnt a lot from people I worked with, professional skills. But it probably helped me talking to people about what I didn't want to do in my career as much as what I really wanted to do. So I worked with a senior manager in London at PwC, and so he was heading towards the partnership, down the partnership path. And when I spoke to him about what he was going to have to do to get there, it kind of pushed me a little bit the other way. And I didn't really want to go down the partnership path. So, an in-house option when I came back from London was a great option. And so that's what I decided to do.
I think it's a really good point. Knowing what you don't want to do is just as much of a decision on that sort of in that, when you're standing at those crossroads of what you can do, and just as important. You're wearing two hats today. You're both sort of reflecting on your own career journey, but you're also a current sponsor on the program and have done it for 2 years running. So I'd be really interested in hearing a bit about how you're finding it now that you have that role and responsibility for helping someone else on their career journey. How are you finding being a sponsor?
Look, it's incredibly rewarding. I've enjoyed every minute. The last 2 years, I've had two sponsees, and it's takes a fair bit of commitment, but the return is really worth it. It's meeting two incredibly talented, high-performing women in our company who I knew both of them before the program, but I know them in a completely different way now, and understand values and what they really want out of their career, and can really advocate for them, not only within the business but outside of the business. And it's almost an automatic reaction. So you go through this really intimate process, and then at the end of it, when you're talking to people, you automatically start thinking, how can I help this person in their career? Who am I talking to? Who might they talk to? How can I build a network for them to develop? So it's an incredibly powerful thing, sponsorship.
Do you think they would have been conversations you would have naturally had without the prompt? Because I guess they're powerful questions to ask, and they've got a big impact on the person. But how natural do you think they would have been without that sort of prompter to give you the oomph to do it?
I think because it creates that safe environment, that trust and confidence, which when people are going through their careers, they may not have that a lot of the time. So I think that's where it starts. It starts in that we can have a confidential conversation and start to build trust pretty quickly, because we talk about values, we talk about what's important, and to build that base allows you to continue. So I don't think you'd ordinarily start at that point with general business relationship conversations.
Yeah, I like, we'll come back to that word trust, no doubt, many times today. I think that goes to the heart of so many things in the world right now, but and these relationships. But Troy, welcome. You're
Kat,
different.
hello.
Hello, different speaker here today. You're not here in a legal capacity, but because you're a person who's spent many years contributing to the progression of many people in Australia in the work you do. Tell us more. What's important to you right now in creating these career pathways for all the people?
All the people, all of
All
them.
the people.
Kat and Nat, thank you for including me today and my panel buddies. I've been enjoying your stories a lot. Some of us only met fairly recently, so I'm learning more about you, on a weekly basis, it seems. A thing that's really important to me in making all of this work is the critical role of leaders in doing two things: understanding who their people are, and then understanding what they need.
Mm.
And so the stories that we've heard about from Bryony and Georgina and Adam they're fantastic, positive stories of growth and progression, and they're about the wonderful people who are here. But also, very importantly, they're about the people around them. It all sounds like you won the leadership lottery, which is really great. You had great people helping along the way. I guess what we want is for that not to be such a lottery, that we want, that this is an expected and normal thing. So sponsorship really is a way of leading. How can, in Adam's words, how can I help those in my team or in my orbit or in my organization? How can I help those other people around me? It's not just about me being the boss and me delivering my numbers or hitting my targets or doing whatever the thing is. It's also about building the capacity and capability of those people around you. So it's very personal and human, this way of leading. It's perhaps been more... There's been more focus on this recently because suddenly in COVID times, many leaders have had the revelation that they've got human beings working for them, and they are undergoing difficulty, financial stress, family stress, health stress, all of it. We're all in the crisis. So that is, that the highlight on this is super important. And if I extend that even further, it shows up in the way we work. So the need for leaders to understand flexibility, and I know we're going to talk about that later, which is this great context for inclusion. So how do I make sure that, the mix of people get what they need out of their experience here? And, not so much that people are male or female or this group or other group, but because everyone is such a collection of intersecting identities. Like, we're all a big melting pot, with little icebergs, little human icebergs walking around, with visible differences and invisible differences, and there's so many of them. So, and all of that enables disadvantage or privilege or opportunity or not, and sometimes all of those things for the same person. So it's not a very long bow to draw to say, be a great leader, create good experiences for other people, make sure you know who they are and what they need, and that will help you be more inclusive, and then all the people will be able to have a great time delivering what it is that you need them to do in your organization. So the important thing for me is the intention. So we need to be intentionally inclusive, intentionally sponsoring, etc. As I was saying to someone the other day, not necessarily just worrying about who's here or who's present or who's speaking or contributing, but who is not doing those things.
Yeah.
So who can I not see?
Yeah.
Or who do I not hear from? Or who is not getting a chance here? And that takes a superior, better kind of leader to do those things.
I love the call out that you used of the personal and human way of leading, because that really goes to that sort of special characteristic where the leader goes out of their way, or any person can do it, to understand the people around them at all their levels. So see past their job title, their gender, their sporting, interests, etc., to see the fullness of the person. And then that's where you discover that potential and that opportunity.
Can I
That's
just
right.
add?
Yeah.
I really like the idea too, Troy, of looking beyond who's got the seat at the table. It's funny, when I was doing my PhD research, it was so obvious because actually people were sitting not at the table but around and it was quite gendered.
Oh, yeah, right.
So
yes.
being very observant of actually who, has got voice and who's granted voice and who's not, and where the silences lie. So I think it's also that awareness as a leader of, of their surroundings and their team members and who is getting access to power and isn't.
Yes, and technology. I mean, what we're doing here, we're all on Zoom calls and stuff. This use of technology is enabling that to be very visible, right? You can even get some of the platforms will give you a readout. They'll even tell you, what are the results of this particular experience that you all just shared together. Who was silent? Who was not so silent? And I heard someone say the other day that and this is really for knowledge workers or for space workers. Who still have jobs, that where as we're becoming more digital or more digitally connected in this way of working, ironically, we're now needing to focus more on our human skills, the uniquely human skills that we have to actually, connect deeply and authentically with each other.
Yeah, it's you wouldn't think that technology has made us bring out our authenticity, but there's certainly elements of that. I mean, I think, Georgina, if you lean to the side a little bit, you've got your amazing Lego creations behind you, which we had a discussion about the other day. I thought that was a really interesting share about the way that you started off presenting on camera and what it's become now.
Yeah, I think that's right, Kat. I shared with the group the other day when we spoke that when COVID first hit and we moved to remote working for all of our board meetings and executive team meetings, I would pack away the Lego at the outset and sort of not really be showing that part of my life. And then one morning I was doing it before a board meeting and I thought, why am I doing this? Why am I packing that away? This is a really big part of my life. I'm a mum. I have 3 children, and I just left it up. And ever since then, it sparked a number of conversations, and it shows a side of me that's a really important part of my life. And it allows you to connect with other people too, because somebody else might say, oh, I've got kids and they love Lego, and it does create a talking point. So, yep. So proudly on display now.
Great, rock that Lego. It's interesting because we've heard it a couple of times in the last few months where sponsees have actually said that they're finding it easier to build a quicker, more human relationship with their sponsorship partner or pair because it's now in this very human context, whereas back in the face-to-face day, it might have been, we're in suits, we're very conscious of our power and our title. We have to go up to the 20th floor to meet with the senior executive. You're in a boardroom type setting. And a lot of people would have read a lot into that context and that positioning. And now you're meeting with each other and the reality of your life is going on behind you. So it's fascinating how far from stopping sponsorship or even these interpersonal relationships happening between talent and leaders, I think there's a real time and a need for it. And it's probably heightened by the fact that if we don't do it consciously now, I think there's a fear that the invisibility of unconsciously ignoring people could be quite damaging to people's future careers. Georgina, we were talking a lot about the impact that different sponsors' behaviours have had on all of you personally. Do you have any sort of insight of what it might have meant for the other person? Because I guess they're taking a big risk helping you to sort of parachute out of financial services and come over to petroleum. And what's in it for them? Is it because they liked you, or is there something that they get out of it as a person?
It's a really good question, Kat, and I think that when we talk about these sponsorship relationships, there is a lot of focus on the sponsee, and that it's important to recognise, and Adam's touched on this a little bit, that there are a lot of benefits for the sponsor as well. I think in my personal circumstance, there were probably a few benefits to my informal sponsor, and that was her own personal development as a leader, as well as the personal satisfaction of seeing me grow and develop into different roles and to be promoted along the way. And she said to me when she left and they promoted me into the general counsel role that it was one of her biggest moments of professional satisfaction, that when she left, rather than going externally to find a replacement for the role, that she had built a succession pipeline. And so that was something she was really really proud about from her own perspective. And I think one of the other things that definitely isn't to be overlooked is that by having that relationship, I had a huge amount of loyalty towards her and for her, and I worked incredibly hard for her.
Yeah.
So because I knew that I had her support and she was supporting me in my career journey, the payback of that was that I was incredibly loyal and committed to her and worked really, really hard. And so she obviously got the benefit of that as well. So I think that there's lots of benefits for the sponsors, not just for the sponsees, particularly in these relationships.
I think it's a really good point, and it's something that people often feel quite uncomfortable about, and they think, oh, you know, if I do any sort of program like this, am I getting a free ticket, you know, an easy ride? And it's absolutely the opposite. People still have to work jolly hard. It's still about performance. It's still about potential. It's just that sometimes you need that sort of that pair of supportive hands to pull you out of the lost lands of, or not thinking that you're ready, or not thinking that you can't do it. Like Brian is there going, I'm not going to do it with twins. And you need these like supportive sort of words and actions to bring you along and change direction and say you can do it. And they get a payback.
Absolutely.
Adam, are you?
Yeah, and Kat, I'll just add. I was just going to add to that. I mean, it also opens up conversation about the type of leadership that the sponsee may want to pursue. So, you know, often they can only see one path and it's linear and it's, you know, this position, then this position, then this position straight up. But actually, if you start to have conversations that are within that trustworthy environment, it might be managerial, it might be more of a technical role, it might be actually something completely different. Yep. And one of the sponsees that I've sponsored one last year, she had an incredibly varied career, even leading up to where she is now. So she actually started as a lawyer. She then ran her own business for 5 years as an entrepreneur, then went into strategy and marketing and communication. So to know that as a sponsor and then work with all of those skills to try and understand what kind of career pathway might happen, I think that's incredibly valuable.
Yeah, we've really found with our program that most of the sponsees say that the program really elevates them up to a global view of the business and takes away some of those blinkers that we normally see where people think there's only really one linear career progression path. And, you know, if you're going to reach, you know, a certain position, that's the path you have to follow. But instead, what we see is that for the business, it retains talent because people see actually a whole world of opportunity within the business. And for the sponsee, they also get a better idea of where their aspirations might lie. I know in my own career in construction, for a good time there, I was kind of lost and thought, you know, what do I want to aspire to be? And part of that is because you're in the trenches. I mean, quite literally in my case, because I was in construction. But, you know, you are in there, you are not seeing that sort of, you know, higher global view of the business or what opportunities lie within the business.
And I think the interesting thing here for law firms...
Yeah, and sort of...
Go for it, Adam.
Sorry, no, I was just going to add one more thing, that that there's a bit of mystery around leadership, and other sponsees in the program at the moment have asked, you know, what does that person actually do? Like, what's their role? Because we're using our leadership team and a few others to be the sponsors. It breaks down those unknowns, so there are more conversations and more opportunities and more networks for those kinds of conversations to happen. So it's breaking down that mystery of leadership.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think that's one of the call outs even for law firms, where I guess we've talked a lot about interesting sideways moves and, you know, industry moves and changes. And I guess in a law firm structure, as we all know, you know, it's a very clear pathway. It is solicitor, senior associate, partner, but along the way there are still many permutations and steps and insights and things that you need in order to keep you on track. And one of the things is exactly what you just called out, that ability to see ahead and go, what does that role look like, and suddenly make it more achievable. And in the 3 years that we've been doing the program, it's one of the biggest results that we get from the sponsees is they time after time say, I had no idea what the senior leaders in this business did. I thought it was something very elevated and different to my role. But now that I've got that insight, I can see that I can do it, but I need to broaden my skills in terms of, you know, stronger client relationship management, or, you know, more broader thinking at a holistic level, or they get a really clear idea of where they are and what the sort of skills are, because it's demystified senior leadership, which when you are a senior leader, I think a lot of people get the impression that surely everyone understands what I do on a daily basis. But apparently it's not that clear. So it's a really good point. I think that opening up of the senior leaders sort of, you know, revelations of what they do and helping the other person see the pathway is invaluable. Usually shrouded in a lot of mystery. I mean, we've talked a lot about, you know, how normally talent management and promotion and progression, all of that sort of in the black box of you know, progression. And quite frankly, that's really had quite an impact on most people, because you've got no idea how it happens. It's the old tap on the shoulder.
I think even in some cases, some of our sponsees have said that they see what the senior leaders do and they have those skills, and those senior leaders are just doing it on a different level to them. So it also reinforces that, you know, they are developing themselves in the appropriate manner. But with those sponsors, they're able to build those networks and also, you know, I guess have a spotlight put on them within their company.
Bridie, what's your experience? I mean, you're obviously now in that people leadership position. So where does the responsibility lie? Is it HR's job to sort of help people progress through their careers, or do you feel that weight upon your shoulders? And how's it distributed at PwC?
No, I think it's absolutely the responsibility of the people within the chain and the ecosystem. And the more senior you are, the more people's careers you are responsible for. And I think HR is there as a support and enabling function. But really, and Georgina's example of her relationship with her mentor is a really awesome way of putting it. It's like if you've got a team of people that you want to work for you, you owe it to them to make sure that you're looking after their best interests in terms of their career progression, not just in terms of the people that you immediately are responsible for, but the people around you in your general orbit and who you might work with. So for me, in my day job now, I'm not always being a lawyer. I wear lots of different hats, and so we'll often be working with people from other teams. And I feel very invested in those people as well, who aren't just, you know, my lawyers in my team. And then if I think about the way that great leaders around me operate, you know, so the head of our global legal practice is an Australian, and he was the head of our legal practice in Australia. He's a fantastic example of an extensive leader who takes a deep interest in all of the people around him, amazing leader who manages to get a lot out of people. But also does a lot for people and in a really interesting way. So hearing some of the conversation here about particularly law firms where the career progression is quite linear, and sometimes to the extent that it's not linear, that's to the detriment of women, particularly when they're coming back from maternity leave and they get put into knowledge management roles, because that's what can be done on a part-time basis, or marketing, etc. One of the things that, you know, as I made the shift to PwC a little over 3 years ago now, and I've been a partner for about nearly 7 years at my old firm, and I was sort of looking ahead and thinking, well, where to next? I'm going to be working for a long time, so where do I want that to be? And PwC was a pretty safe step for me, because it was kind of like what I was doing, but not really. And I kind of had this thought in my head that maybe it would broaden my skill set, like rather than going and doing an MBA, maybe I'd kind of learn on the job and get paid for it as well. And so what I discovered there is, you know, an amazing thing in terms of the fact that there is not the same linear pathway. But I remember, right, having this conversation, one of my, you had to go and have this big sort of scary interview, because PwC is a massive organisation compared to even the largest of large law firms in Australia. And so I had to go and talk with the executive board members, and it's different to most law firms in it's like values-led organisation in a mature way, where it's a bit odd for a cynical lawyer where you kind of stand around and do value shares at the beginning of every meeting, that kind of thing. And so we were talking about values in this meeting, and I had made a mistake in that I had not rote learnt the PwC values before going in.
Uh-oh.
I've since discovered that they're on the PwC notebooks, so you can cheat. Anyone else?
That was
So we're having this conversation, and the then CFO said to me, "Tell me about your values," and I said loyalty. So to me, having come out of a law firm environment, loyalty was incredibly important. And he said to me, "That's interesting, Bryony. I think loyalties can be misplaced." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, you know, I've got so many people who work for me over the years, and the worst thing I could ever want for them would be to stick around and just work for me and not look for what's best for them that might be outside of the organisation."
Wow.
And so the wonderful thing for working for an organisation like the one I work for now is that a bit of this is mercenary as well, in that it's kind of like a university, in that the alumni is incredibly strong. We're really proud. We went through some really hard stuff a couple of months ago in terms of downsizing, and had to say goodbye to quite a few people. But some of the feedback that we got on LinkedIn was just wonderful in terms of that strength of alumni, and that the capacity for partners and other senior people in the business to jump so quickly on looking for opportunities within their network for those people. So sometimes a strong sponsor is someone who is able to have an honest conversation with you about your career in a more holistic way outside of your organisation as well.
Yep.
On a really practical day-to-day level, in terms of how you engender responsibility. So it is hard, and that's why I think, for me, I think I got really lucky in terms of people around me. But how do you solve for that in a scenario where that's not there? And how also do leaders learn if they're not taught through good example?
Yep.
So we have a really interesting system at PwC, and I think some of my team members might be on this, so they're probably going to groan when I'm talking about this. But we use an HRS system called Workday, which is sort of our portal for a number of different key personnel information and process points. So it has all of our, everyday HR personnel information. It's how you sort of access leave. It's also how you deal with performance reviews and ratings and so on. But the way that it's structured is that it's kind of a cadence sort of down from an apex person in an organisation. So that you actually have going down, because there's about 7,000 of us in Australia, you have team leaders who would be, for example, in my team, I have senior associate level solicitors who are actually responsible for people underneath them, so solicitors and graduates and paralegals and so on, who they are actually responsible for very sort of, scheduled catch-ups, their performance evaluation. They are involved in our moderation and our discussion, so they get to hear us as leaders talking about what we value and the rating system and how we do that, and moderations for pay, equity reasons, etc. And I actually, it's a great deal of administrative burden, and I was a bit skeptical about it when it started as well. But now I see that it's a really great way to begin to sort of demonstrate the need for, at a really early level in career, the need for sort of how you have those conversations.
Yeah. It sounds like there's a lot of transparency in that as well. And we all referred to the black box of how career management can happen in different environments, but that sounds incredibly transparent. So you know what you've got to talk about, you know what you've got to get on the table, get prepared.
You do, and if you are in a values-led organisation where that's clearly linked to your performance evaluation process, and you talk about it all the time, and you have it written out in all of your notebooks.
Yep.
And you do value shares at the beginning of every team meeting, and it's there in terms of what you live and breathe. It becomes second nature.
Absolutely.
It seems a bit cult-like, kind of, going from the outside in, from cynical law firm lady into something a little different. But it really does have an impact on, I think, culture generally, and the way that people want to have conversations about people's careers.
Yeah. So obviously those mindsets, behaviours, and ways that we go about these processes impact on retention enormously. One of the other things we know is really important is the sort of context in which our lives occur. So I think it's time to talk about flex. Obviously the big other factor in all of this, and a huge retention and attraction issue for many people about whether they feel comfortable doing the job and can they stay there, can they contribute their whole self, is that role accommodating of their life needs. So Troy, I mean, I think many people would know you as one of the architects of All Roles Flex at Telstra, so something you're very familiar with. Did it take you by surprise that now the whole world virtually, or at least Australia, is remote working? It's like a global All Roles Flex project.
It's a little bit of a hashtag I told you so. For me personally, not speaking on behalf of Telstra at all, of course, but I mean, it's not like we didn't mention it before that flex might have been a good idea. But of course, there's the difficulties that are associated with a global health crisis that mean people need to change. Some people get the choice, or get the opportunity, I should say, to change where they work.
Yes.
So I am delighted. I've been delighted to see the growth, the courage, the confidence, the experimentation that's happened all around the world, actually, in lots of different markets that I'm across. And side by side with that, sometimes I just have a bit of a groan to myself when I see someone who might be in a very senior position in an organisation say, "Oh yes, I finally worked out that I can work at home," and like that's good and helpful. But I mean, I'm being brutally honest. Sometimes it's like, "Oh really? What took you so long?" So that's it's been on the whole, on balance, I should say. Very great to see flexible location becoming such a thing. Of course, it's not real flexibility if your employer or your government or both tell you that you have to work in your small house and homeschool your children and also be there with your abusive partner.
Yeah.
So that's
Marita, we hear you. Marita's just shared that. This is not flexible work.
Oh, there we go. Great. Yes, indeed. Yeah. So not flexible. So there's been a good realization about, yes, we can let go of some of what we didn't think we could let go of in terms of location, because we've been forced to do this experiment. But it's not until we actually remember the importance of employee choice and agency and the flexibility that we've always wanted, that we'll actually get it right and learn what we need to learn out of this time. Government and other requirements notwithstanding, hopefully we will have learned some great things from this experiment, and we'll be able to pull the best pieces from that. Technology is a huge and important thing, enabling people with the support that they might need for things like internet or equipment or whatever, remembering that not everybody's home is the same as your home. So the capacity to actually have as much space as you need isn't the same for everybody. And there are other things going on. So I'd like to pardon me, also the other thing is that I think one of the good things about this time is that we've had a wake-up call about ableism, right? So for years and years, people living with disability have had to ask, some cases plead, for reasonable adjustments or special adjustments, and it's to be recognised that as soon as we all had to work from home suddenly, a lot of stuff that people on the margins or people who live with disability who might have been in a minority have been asking for forever, so really easy for everybody. So suddenly we seem to be able to kind of do some stuff about universal design or make quick shifts. So I hope that this has helped organisations and leaders think, well, maybe we can adjust some other stuff with more agility than we have in the past. I could talk about Flex all day. What else do I want to say about Flex?
Can I pull something out of that, Troy, which I think is relevant to the audience we have online, which is sort of law firms and professional services, because I love your choice of language around, True flex is employee choice and agency. But I know firsthand in my own experience, and there'll be many others, as a working parent, I did not have choice and agency over my potential career path when I wanted to work in a way that accommodated my kids. I mean, that very first interview, the guy literally said, "You're not going to come here and have babies. I'm not interested." And then I had other jobs where people, partners would look at me and say, "Good afternoon," when I came in at 10 after dropping off the kids, which sent me the very strong signal I was not welcome to, work flexibly. So I guess my question to all of you is one of the potential benefits that people are all getting a higher sense of choice and agency, and are we becoming more accommodating of that in the way we work? Like, have we reached that point yet? Do we think that it's becoming more acceptable, or are we still in an experiment and it too will end and we all snap back to normal?
I think if I may, I think
Kat,
sorry.
Sorry, Troy, you go.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the snapback people are ready to snap back, and they're quite keen to make sure that everything goes back to normal. So it's important that whatever lessons are learned are championed. There is a thing which is about some of the changes that I've seen are really changes to norms and culture. So all of the resistance stuff, which is about the good afternoon and you couldn't possibly do that job, with children or part-time. Organizations are and good leaders, progressive leaders are finding that they're needing to change some of that stuff. So those cultural norms which were hard or difficult to change beforehand are starting to see a bit of a shift, and that's great. We can't underestimate how important the cultural part of this is. And importantly, I'll say the permission or the modelling from leaders to be visible in their own use of flexible work, and therefore the enablement of other people. HR policy is part of that, but it's becoming, HR people will hate me saying this, but it's like critical for guidelines. We need to know about all of these things, and we need to have some rules and some barriers, some boundaries in place. But we also have to be flexible about flexibility, otherwise it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Yes.
Adam. Were you going to jump in and say something?
Sorry, yeah. Look, I was going to say. You mentioned retention, Kat, and with what's happened over the last few months, I think firms and companies that don't set a very high baseline of flexible work from here on in are going to be left behind. And conversations I had, like, drastically left behind, because we've set a huge watermark. And if you're not doing really progressive stuff in flexible work, then you're going to lose talent. So I think talent acquisition is a huge issue that's going to come up. I know that I spoke to at least 2 or 3 senior women lawyers before all of this happened, and they said they had left firms because the flexible work policy was there. There was a flexible work policy in place, but it wasn't the reality. So it has direct consequences. And look, ACOM, as an example, has had flexible work for at least 6 years, which was started by our previous CEO, Lara Poloni, and the productivity benefits, the trust that it's built through the company has been phenomenal. So I think it's a must-have. You cannot go forward as a company or a firm without having a great flexible work policy.
Yeah, I think the massive challenge for professional services firms is flexibility. Is having flexibility policy is great. It's the indirect discrimination that arises out of having hours targets, billable hours targets, so that you're still going to get through the volume of work to succeed. That is just problematic. So for as long as you are in an organisation where your worth is tied to how many hours a day you work, I just think the future is pretty bleak. I think all professional services.
But is it an hours-based issue, or is it more? Sorry, I was going to say, is it an hours-based issue, or is it more about visibility? Because often, you go through working for a law firm, professional services, and it's sort of, if you're not there, you're not seen to be busy, or you're not billing, and I think that's an issue that firms need to get over. I think that visibility piece is really hard.
I think visibility is part of it, but also how you attribute revenue is also a really big part of it. So if you attribute revenue based on somebody's personal billings, which still happens a lot in law firms, that's problematic. If you attribute revenue based on accretive sort of value, not only to what you generate in your immediate pool, but outside, and you understand, you know, that in any organisation there's probably sort of 10 to 15% of partners in a professional services organisation who generate most of the work together. And if you look at it that way and look at how effective people are in selling cross-line of service work, which goes just as much in large professional services firms as in law firms, to me, that's a much more equitable way of, and it's also a better way of understanding productivity and value. But it's just not really the way that and partnerships in particular can be a problematic beast in terms of your capacity to change attitudes to flexibility and revenue models. It's really about and I'm focusing on that being a partner, and that's not the experience for everyone. But there is still sitting behind that billable hours target, which is problematic.
But I think it's interesting because it's actually rewarding a different behaviour rather than really hardcore individualism. I need highest possible single individual revenue possible to team-based collective. I'm going to coach, guide and mentor and lift the whole team so all boats rise to the top. I mean, that goes right to the heart of all the relationships we've been talking about.
I also think too that it really points directly to where change has to take place, which is in the structure of how we do work. And that for too long we've tinkered around the edges rather than looking at how work is designed and, you know, the values placed on, you know, very antiquated ways of working that traditionally were based around a male breadwinner with no care responsibilities and this sort of ideal worker. So I think, you know, I would hope that, you know, doing the Cultivate program, for instance, leaders are starting to see where the structural blockers and barriers are and start stepping up to make those changes as they build and get to understand that for some people, you know, it's unachievable to build those hours, but they're bringing in other value in other ways. So I think it's a really core area to move into now and to tackle. And I think, you know, if I may, coming from the construction sector, I'm working on a study at the moment on a 5-day work week. And honestly, people are saying, oh, it's not, you can't do that. You can't work 5. You've always got to work 6 or 7. You watch towards the end of the job, they'll have to work 7. That site is, you know, absolutely cooking with gas. And we're studying the well-being and the cost-benefit analysis of that job. So I think the thing is that companies and clients, how they procure and tender, have to be asking for some of these innovative pilots to be taking place to see how we can change the way we work, because they do have gendered consequences in many cases.
I think there are enough apparently smart people in law firms and consulting firms who could dream up a whole new system. They should build it and sell it to each other or something.
Yes.
Build it and they will come.
Like, it's not a law of nature. We can change these things. They're all changeable.
Yeah.
Well, I think we've demystified the ability of people to continue to work in flexible ways and produce a viable income. The male partners are doing that too now. So perhaps we could now understand that all people, irrespective of their gender or their work-life responsibilities, are capable of continuing to work under any circumstances. And perhaps wanting flexibility isn't actually a career killer. It might be the X factor that makes somebody highly successful.
Yes, I mean, everybody has other stuff to do.
Yes.
So we all kind of have to find a way to make work, and the rest of our work not like a special thing. Shouldn't be. Anyway.
So I'm conscious, and I hope everyone's realised online, that we did book this till 3:30 because we knew that this would happen, that there would be more gold than is possibly consumable in 1 hour. So I do want to encourage everyone to get those questions in there so that Simone's got some work to do, because she is meant to be able to pop those questions. And I think there's a new thematic emerging there that I reckon we should have a look at, that Paul has raised.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions that are coming through. There's one great question here is, how well do we feel that young people entering the workforce are aware of the sponsorship and mentorship dynamic so that they are able to receive it and look for opportunities for it? And if there's a gap in that, then how could we improve that, I suppose? Do you want to talk to that one, Adam, having been involved in the program? Do you think that the more junior staff coming in aren't aware of sponsorship or mentorship, or?
Look, I think that's right, and I think one of the key elements for success in a sponsorship program like this is for leadership not only to work with the sponsees if they're a sponsor, but to filter the messages down to middle managers. So, we've run employee surveys where the idea of the culture within the company isn't making its way, or the same messages aren't making their way from leadership down to middle managers, and they're the ones that are asking questions. So if middle managers don't know what's really happening, they probably don't know about the sponsorship program. How are they then delivering the right messages down to people coming into the company, new young people coming into the company? So I think that's really key. It has to be communicated widely. Everyone should be aware of what the program is, what it stands for, why we're doing it. And it shouldn't really stop at a leadership to senior high performing women. It should go much
Absolutely.
further down than that. Yeah.
Be part of the value set like PwC.
Well, I think it goes to that transparency.
Exactly, the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And I wanted to. Oh, sorry, Katrina.
No, you go.
I was just going to say, I wondered too whether it should actually go further back than just the workplace, and maybe we should be looking at universities and TAFEs and schools for the message to start coming across there. I mentor a small group of final year uni students, and it's absolutely one of the topics that we discuss now. And so I'll be encouraging them when they do enter into the workforce to be actively seeking out those sponsors and mentors to help them and guide them along their way. And so I think we need to think more broadly than just the workplace and think about how the other institutions that are shaping our future leaders can play a role in this.
I also feel like for much of my career, I bumbled along not realising there was such a thing as a sponsor until I sort of, banged into one. And I think the thing is, I also believe, having been an athlete, that the rules of the game were crystal clear, and if I just worked my backside off, I'd get to the top. And quite frankly, that was not the competition environment I was in. There were other rules that were going on that I wasn't privy of, like the speed in which I had to reach a certain level within my career, and also the fact that there was this sort of invisible sponsorship taking place. So I think, to Kat's point, transparency around not even how we codify the way we recruit and progress people and promote them, but also, to tell people that, there is sponsorship happening, and to actively, as senior leaders, to sponsor as well as young people to be out there and seeking out sponsors.
And I think we've got to overcome some hard baked norms here. I mean, I think we still pay a lot of credence to hierarchical thinking. Like if I think back to when I first started in the law firm, there's absolutely no way I would have rocked up to a partner or senior partner or managing partner's, office and said, hey, could we talk about my career path? Like even if I was invited to do it, I don't know if I would have actually talked about it openly.
Yeah, I think values are really important for that reason, Kat. We had an experience. So a lot of the legal partners at PwC are pretty new to PwC and have all come out of long careers at large Australian firms. And I had this experience where we had a summer clerk who was like really, go-getter summer clerk who we discovered had invited the managing partner for a coffee, and the partner who managed our financial advisory business, which is about a third of our business, for a coffee, and all of these people were like, oh my God, but these people had coffee with this person. And I was having a conversation with one of the other partners from Clayton Youth, who just laughed and said, well, good on him, Bryony, and isn't it great that in this organisation, she's like, you've got to get your head around the fact that in this organisation, that's what people do. because it's an organisation which is far more sort of business focused and about relationships and teaching people to have relationships early on. I think when I was starting out, I had heaps of sponsors. I just didn't realise what they were, and I'd go along to sort of conversations, you know, that were sort of more sort of formal things for women in the workplace, etc. And I get really stressed because I was like, oh, I don't actually have a sponsor or a mentor. Like, I thought it was a thing and a person that had to be titled and really formal. And then as I kind of went along in life, I realised that I was actually surrounded by sponsors and mentors, and had been for a really long time through university, from great lecturers through to the law firm that I worked at, while I was going through university and so on. And like a lot of those people are still in my life today. So I think that's a really important thing, demystifying that it's actually really about having a relationship with someone who's been doing it for longer than you have.
Yep. I think it's a really good point. The onus, I think, though, on leaders is to make sure that when they're having those coffees and building those relationships, that it's outside of the obvious ones, because that's where this thing starts to go down a perpetuating cycle. Because yes, these relationships happen all day, every day. It's just that they tend to be more beneficial to, people who get on that path of creating that relationship. So if you're quiet, or if you're not in the limelight, or if you're for some reason different to the norm in that environment, or you're invisible for whatever reasons because you've self-selected, or didn't even self-select, but you have to work differently, you might be missing out. And so it takes the bigger leader, I think, in that instance, to actively look for that person. And it's sometimes you have to look to your leadership charter for that sort of stuff, which is why I think your values are really important, because I've done work with companies where the leadership charter, wanted people to be bold and brazen and, out there. And so the people who were shyer were actually thought to be not quite living up to the values. But you got to go, who's got the onus to draw those, those diamonds in the rough out? Karen's asking an interesting question here. Do you think there's an opportunity in the workplace for men to be mentored on equal work share on the home front? Good one. Especially when there are children involved. This is still a huge problem, and the data indicates COVID has only made it worse.
May I say yes, there is an opportunity. I mean, we're obviously talking about opposite sex households, I think, here, which is most households, most parenting arrangements. I think there's conflicting data from COVID. Like, some of the University of Melbourne stuff was like, everyone's doing more unpaid work at home. Men are doing half as much of more, and women are doing twice as much as they were before, or something. So there was that imbalance. And then I saw something else, like a later version of that same report, that said actually a lot of men, again, opposite sex households, are stepping up and doing more than we thought at the start. Having said that, I'm with Karen. Everyone should pull their weight at home, and it's not only is it on people in relationships to work that out. Hopefully you've got a nice relationship and people can kind of do that. But it's also about workplaces realizing that they need to reevaluate some of the norms or expectations that they're putting on particular groups in their businesses. So I have a colleague or a friend who, her workplace is all flexible, and she was doing all the things in Melbourne. So that means everything. And her male partner wanted to also help out at home, but his employer still had the outdated expectations of the male breadwinner. So there was no relax on the pressure, or no relax on the expectations, or no relax on the time that he had to spend doing his 24/7 job with no visible caring responsibilities, even though he had 3 of his own children at home being taken care of by somebody else. There was no sharing enabled by that workplace. So there's both elements, and workplaces can do a lot about debunking those myths and helping, we'll say, men get better at this. Long answer, but yes.
Long but insightful. Sorry.
I think it's true when it comes into another point, that I always heard in law firms, that until now, they used to always say, oh, we can't do flex. It doesn't work for us. We have to be available 24/7. This is not, we can't allow flexibility. And yet over the years that I've been in law firms, that I saw lots of different flexibility. And to pick up on Karen's other question there, it wasn't just parents that had flexibility. I remember one lawyer who was a professional windsurfer in her spare time, and she was off windsurfing every morning and wasn't in the office until 11, and that was just known, and that was okay, and that was fine. But I think it comes back to your culture and your values, and it does come back to your leadership team. You know, if everyone agrees to that and everyone is supportive of that, then you've got a very different environment than one where they say we can't do it. And, you know, regularly over the years, there were many things I tried to change in law firms and I was told that you can't do it. And that, you know, the biggest thing does come back to Bryony's point. It's that billable hour, you know, that expecting people to have 8 billable hours a day, you really are expecting them to work more than 12 hours a day to be able to actually get that billable hour of 8 hours. And it's just not practical for men or women these days. You know, hearing Adam say he doesn't want to go to partnership, good on you. You know, I always sat there thinking, wow, I just don't know what's expected here. And then I've come across, you know, partners inspiring like Bryony and others that have managed the balance and have for a period of their partnership work part-time as well. And I think good on you. And let's just show everyone that we can do this, because otherwise, you know, why can everyone else do it? Why can other organisations do it and not law? You know, they feel like the last industry to change everything, and we need to change it.
And that's a great place to end. We do need to change it in so many areas where we still have male dominance, both in positions of power, but throughout the organisations. And there's many ways we can change it. And today we picked up on the structural changes, also embedding and sponsorship and that awareness of leaders, you know, in terms of challenging the behaviours and the structures that we have in place. I would like to, I'm conscious of time, and I'd like to thank all our panelists, Bryony, Troy, Georgina, Adam, and for taking part today and for giving us these pearls of wisdom focused on the legal profession and professional services, but also gender equality broadly. If you would like to know more about the Cultivate Sponsorship program, you can go to cultivatesponsorship.com, and there's plenty of information there, or reach out to Kat and I. We are staying on the line for another approximately 15 minutes to answer questions, and we might actually also just try and run the video again, because I don't think that you got the echo that we were receiving when we first started. Was that right? It was okay, Troy, the video?
Yes, I thought it was. Okay. I am one voice, but yes.
Okay. Georgina, was it okay?
I didn't see it. No, it wasn't working for me.
I got an echo, but I think that
too. Oh, you did. Okay, yeah. Well, we won't do that. Then we'll stay on Q&A. But you can see the video on our website, which will give you a nice overview about the program. And yeah, and thank you very much for joining us if you're heading off. But if you have any questions, please fire away. This is your opportunity now, and we're here to answer them for you.
I think there's another very good comment here from Gemma that, you know, there's the irony with law firms that they expect employees to be flexible and work all hours of the day to meet client needs, but then don't give the flexibility back. And that's very true comment.
It's so true, actually, and I might just jump in there on that one, Gemma. It's a great point. I'm really conscious of it, being a user of law firms now, being in an in-house environment, and I'm really quite strict with, I guess, my team and also our commercial counterparts about how they use law firms and how they respect law firms. And, you know, people that work at law firms are people. They're family members, whether they're parents or in a family themselves. And I had an example recently where working on a very large transaction, and the team had been working extremely long hours to get it done, and the partner was having a few days off, and I gave the directive to everyone at my company that under no circumstances were they to contact that partner. If they needed to contact him, it had to come through me. So I think that it's important that people do recognise that law firms can be at the absolute coalface of this and do suffer from that lack of flexibility because the expectations are so high.
If I may add an example, it's a Telstra example, and I'm sure she won't mind me sharing this, but when Carmel Mulhern, who was our Group General Counsel now at Commonwealth Bank, when All Roles Flex began, Carmel wrote to the firms that our in-house legal team are working with and said, we're trying this new way of working. We're going to be doing, we've got flexibility in every job for any reason. So that's what we're going to be doing and trying it out. And we'd love to know from you two things. One, how can we help you also try that out? But also, two, if any of our new ways of working aren't working for you, we'd love to know about that. So it was this sort of sharing, listening, learning process that was intended to inspire some changes in the ecosystem, but also, get the feedback while it was happening, which turned out to be quite successful for the group.
I think it's really tough because ultimately we are a client service industry, and if every one of our clients was like Georgina, and I have some amazing clients. I had a client who gave me a lecture for sending him an email on a Saturday recently.
Wow.
So, which is great, and this is the thing, like having these really great client relationships where they're invested in your teams and also your people as well. It's what's good about being a labour lawyer, right? But I think if I think about it, there's lots of different types of work that I do. So some of it's more sort of like audit work, which is, a bit more of a structured time frame for delivery. Some of it's compliance work where a client, is dealing with the ATO or the Fair Work Ombudsman, and there's a need to get things done like yesterday. And then there's private equity M&A work, which is just a whole other kind of land. And there's this tension, in terms of it's the more senior you get, the more responsibility you take on yourself to protect your own team members, which is a really, really important thing to do. But we, I know that we as an organisation, as a group of partners, are struggling with this during COVID because we are, the employee feedback. So Adam mentioned employee surveys, like really, really important way to collect information on an anonymous basis in a large organisation. We know that right now people are having incredible difficulty switching off. And being a client organisation where we're coming out of what we hope is a V-shaped recovery. So just piling on anything that moves at the moment. And when you are in a client service organisation where your livelihood depends on it, it's really, really difficult. So I think I'm kind of listening to this conversation, and it's one that I just always feel very, I have very mixed emotions about, because I don't know what the right answer is. There needs to be flexibility both sides, but what that means is, and I think, Simone, when I was at Baker's, I had an amazing, and she is still an amazing, more than a sponsor, a mentor, a really senior female partner at Baker's, who said to me when I had my first child, you just kind of have to realise that flexibility is not about an even balance in a linear way that happens all year.
Yeah.
It goes like this. It's like a roller coaster. You need to give yourself permission to take a break and really take the time when there's a lull, because sometimes the more senior you get, the nature of the job is when you're at the client's behest all of the time, you will just need to jump in. The other final thing that I would say, which has been really refreshing for me in my experience at PwC, is that I have been involved in matters where senior partners have made a call to not work for a client or to speak to a client about inappropriate behaviour towards our staff, which I just, that might have something to do with market power.
Yes. But I think it's an interesting point that at the client's behest, and what Georgina raises is when clients use their purchasing power, their procurement power to change behaviours, because there has been a traditional mindset for a long time of always on, always client ready. When the work comes, we do it. Like, yes, if it's a regulatory or legal requirement, it's due on a due date. But if the due date is set by a client, do we have the guts to actually negotiate and deal with that? And
100%. I think the other thing, it's a two-way street.
Yeah.
It's the client actually also being conscious that there are human beings doing the work, and that it's a human response. But the other side of it is that I think it's also the businesses saying to clients, is there wiggle room here, and is there an alternative that we can we can look at here or test out. And I take your point though, Bryony, we are in a very difficult position economically, but I also think too that it is always a negotiation, and I, quite frankly, in my sector of construction, I don't think there has been that many negotiations. It's been quite set in stone and everybody follows suit.
But like the construction industry's challenge, a 6-day or 7-day workday norm, and saying, hang on, let's just adjust it back to 5 days, and knowing it's sometimes 6. It's like, what norms could we possibly challenge right now in that thinking about always having to be on, always having to be ready to the client? And
it speaks to the values of the company that is printed on the notebook or on the website. You know, it goes back to the very fact, is that company and its leaders living to those values? You know, and I know it's really challenging, but I think also there's great respect there when that conversation is had. Some clients, I'm sure, will brush it other way, but others actually will be on board and hopefully responsive of it and own, you know, I guess the footprint they're having or they're leaving within your organisation on your employees and the people working there.
Absolutely. All right, it's a couple of minutes before 3:30, so we will let everybody get away respectful of time, which is exactly what we've been talking about. So you can have a chance to get a cup of tea or do whatever you need before your next meeting. Both our audience members who have hung on right to the end, which just goes to show how enthusiastically they are embracing this conversation, and I think enjoying listening to something a bit refreshingly real and honest, and naming some of the stuff that has held change back. Thank you to our speakers for inspiring that and sharing those stories. We've talked a lot about you know, younger people, upcoming people needing to see, hear the reality of careers, and I think you've done exactly that. Like, you know, share your stories, share your insights and wisdom about what you know. So I thank you for doing that so honestly, Lego and all, and we appreciate your time, everyone, and encourage everybody to continue to create those career pathways for everybody, visible and invisible, around you. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.